In this video, I'm going to show you the one bad habit that rules over every other bad habit. And if you don't learn to master changing this habit, it makes changing every other habit much more difficult. Hi, welcome back to Mental Health Power. So when I say that there is one bad habit to rule them all, what I mean is that if we consider the kind of bad habits that are most spoken about, so let's say unhealthy eating, lack of exercise, negative thinking, we could say ignoring our emotions, relationship problems, that kind of thing. All of these ultimately stem from habitual behaviors, so we could say habits. And so what can happen is, as we know, every new year people want to create New Year's resolutions, which are ultimately just the desire to change habits. But I'm sure you've heard stories of people who will go to, let's say, the gym, and for the first 2 months when you're at the gym, you'll notice that there are all kinds of new people there, but gradually they start fading away until only a few remain, or those who are already at the gym from the previous year are still there too. So basically, those people were not able to keep the habit, so they weren't able to keep their New Year's resolutions. And there are studies that have been done on this, which is quite interesting to look at, where they've even worked out there's a specific day where, on average, most people will quit their New Year's resolutions, which again is another way of saying that is the point where they quit changing the habit. And so what we can say is that the ability for us to change habits, i.e. to change our habitual behaviors, the behaviors that we repeat over and over again, is ultimately what is going to lead to our well-being. So if you can change your habits and you get good at that, then you can ultimately create and change your well-being. So if you're eating really bad, for example, and you're struggling, if you can master the ability to change your habits, then you can create good physical well-being in terms of your diet. And that will apply to other habits as well. Of course, the reason why so many people will quit or will find it very difficult to keep trying to change the habit, because it is difficult. But why is it so difficult to maintain? I'm sure we've all had that experience where we first try to change a habit, and for the first couple of weeks we feel lots of drive to change it, but that drive gradually fades away until we just stop and we give up, until maybe later on we'll try again, and we end up going in this cycle. We never seem to be able to stick to it for long enough. Obviously some people can for some things, but others maybe not so much. So the thing that makes it difficult is when we come to this resistance. So when I say resistance, I know that's quite a vague term to use. What I'm referring to is the feeling of inner resistance. So let's say somebody decides they want to start doing exercise every day, or let's say they want to learn to meditate every day. When they start doing it, is usually because they have a lot of willpower behind it, they can usually stick to it. After a couple of days or weeks, that's when it starts to get difficult, and that's when this resistance comes up. So we could say that resistance is ultimately negative feelings, or what we perceive as being negative feelings, that make us not want to continue performing this habit or practicing this new thing that we want to make part of our daily life. And so when we feel this resistance, eventually it becomes too much. These emotions, these thoughts become too much, and so we give up. Or we could say we let it go and then we maybe try again in the future, but it's still essentially giving up. And this is fine. This is what we all go through in different ways for different things. Some things we very easily learn, some things takes a lot longer. So why does this happen, and how does this apply to our well-being and mental health? And it's because this one bad habit is ultimately rooted in the resistance. So really we could say the one bad habit to rule them all is when you essentially take this. It's when you keep taking the path of least resistance. So whenever we try something new, we will experience some level of discomfort and resistance. Maybe not for every single thing that's new, for quite a lot of things it can be that way. And so what can often happen is we try something new, let's say a new diet, maybe we try some new food, maybe we try something new at work, maybe we go to a new area where we live, and depending on the person, we can experience a lot of internal resistance to the new experience. And so because of that resistance, we simply move away from the source of the resistance, or what we perceive to be the source of resistance, and then we go back into our comfort zone. So we could say we experience resistance when we start going outside of our comfort zone. The problem is, if we master this bad habit of continually taking the path of least resistance, so whatever doesn't create the most resistance, whatever doesn't create feelings of discomfort within us, this is actually dangerous, because it means since changing our habits does require some level of discomfort, sometimes quite a lot of discomfort, it means we're avoiding creating new habits that are beneficial for our well-being. So an example of this, somebody decides, I'm going to change my diet. So then they start throwing out food that's bad for them. They start, let's say, introducing newer foods. But as they start trying this new diet, it feels bad to them emotionally. Maybe they start having thoughts about themselves that makes them feel bad about themselves for underlying reasons they're not aware of. So this resistance builds up. After a few weeks, they go back to their old way. Because the path of least resistance is to just go back into their comfort zone. You can say the same thing happens for, let's say if somebody has like a negative pattern of thinking. It takes effort, and to think differently about themselves does actually require not only changing the way they think, but also changing the things they say about themselves to other people. This can be a bit uncomfortable, but they have to persist with it. So the path of least resistance is just not to do that and to go back to negative way of thinking. Of course, that doesn't actually help them to reach their goals, but the problem is that so often we do take the path of least resistance, even if it takes us away from what we really want in life, because we are very, very adaptable as a species, for better or worse. So we can adapt to harsh situations, whether psychological, emotional, or physical. And that's a very good thing if we're in a situation that we can't escape from. But often we can actually escape and get to where we want to be, either mentally, emotionally, or physically, right? But we get so used to that discomfort that whenever we start to move out of it, we experience this resistance, this inner feeling of going out of our comfort zone. So the problem is, if we do master this bad habit of constantly taking the path of least resistance, so anytime there's some level of discomfort, nope, we don't go there, we're ultimately never going to reach the goals that we really want. We're remaining in comfort, so within our comfort zone. But comfort does not equal happiness. And this is something that took me a very long time to realize, because when we're comfortable, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually truly happy when you think about it. And this is because quite a lot of the things that make us comfortable actually rely on external things, so external factors. And when those external things are taken away and we start to feel incredible discomfort, that's the resistance. But when you start to experience true happiness, you realize it doesn't come from external things, it comes from within. So even when external things change, you can still feel happy, or at the very least, you can still experience the acceptance of the situation, which is just one step below happiness. You have to accept the situation instead of resisting it. So to explain it further, this is a diagram to show exactly what happens. So this is a person, and let's say they have a goal here. So let's use the example again of somebody who wants to become more physically fit. So they decide, all right, I'm going to do more exercise. And again, you can apply this to many other types of habits that you want to change. So we start here, and there's a decision to make. So you can either choose to go back to your doing your previous habits, which is not exercising, and it's comfortable to do that. There's no resistance. Or you can choose to pursue your goal, which is to become physically fit. To become physically fit, you will need to go through several psychological, emotional, and physical hurdles. So let's say they start working out in the mornings. The first few weeks is fine, until eventually, let's say, after the third week, they start to feel that resistance set in. Something becomes uncomfortable. Maybe they realize that they're not getting the results they wanted. So they look in the mirror, for example, and they're like, oh, it's not working. And so what happens is that insecurities start getting triggered. Unresolved issues start getting triggered. They start feeling bad about themselves. This is just one example. I'm not saying everyone is like this. So as they start going through these hurdles, it's not just the physical hurdle of doing the exercise every day. There's the psychological aspect as well of actually making themselves get up every day to actually perform the habit of exercise. And so every time they come across these hurdles, it will trigger these unresolved issues. And that's resistance. And so a part of them does not want to do this. That's where the resistance comes from. And so usually at this point, people will most likely just go back and choose the path of least resistance. So again, there's no resistance here. And then they simply end up back at square one. I've done this many times. We've all done this for so many things. It's going to be different for different people. And then eventually they get the willpower back and they try again. They hit the barriers and then they go back. And this will loop maybe every year. I imagine many people do this every New Year's Day for as part of the New Year's resolution. So the key is the fact that it's these barriers, this resistance, that holds them back. But really, the more that they do this, the more that they keep taking this path of least resistance, they're building up that habit. So this means that in other aspects of their life, they are more likely now to take the path of least resistance. Maybe there's a promotion at work, it does require more effort, but they've got so used to taking the path of least resistance. They may feel that discomfort of going outside of their comfort zone at work or at school, for example. Maybe they realize they can make new friends, but this now requires them to experience some resistance. It requires them to go outside of their comfort zone. So they will experience probably unresolved issues and insecurities they'll have to deal with if they want to get to that goal of, let's say, the new friends group or the promotion. The problem is that we have not really, generally not been taught how to deal with these things. Of course, there are many tools out there I've learned. That's what I speak about on this channel. And so the other trap is, as people continue to go through the loop of choosing the path of least resistance, it may seem from their perspective, I did this again for so many years in so many ways, it may seem to us like we're fine where we are, in not going outside the comfort zone, that we're comfortable. But our happiness, our true happiness, which you could say is from the needs that we need to meet, either psychological, emotional, physical needs, usually lies behind overcoming these barriers. And so while we think that we're fine in our comfort, as the years go by, what we don't realize is that our comfort zone, so this is the comfort zone. Let's just see here. So this is the comfort zone, the black one here, but every year the comfort zone gradually, slowly but surely gets smaller and smaller and smaller, because we're mastering this, taking the path of least resistance. But so this is the resistance here, the unresolved issues, the insecurities from, let's say, our past that we need to learn to resolve. These don't resolve themselves. And that's the problem, because if as a society generally haven't been taught how to deal with this. And so then by taking the path of least resistance and mastering that bad habit, these issues here get worse and worse over time. And so that means that our comfort zone will continue to shrink until maybe, let's say, 30 years later, we realize, oh my God, I used to be able to do all kinds of things and now I don't do it. And so really the key here is dealing with these things here. So dealing with the resistance first. So whenever you experience inner resistance, you need to face it directly. So don't resist the resistance, otherwise we get in this weird resistance loop. So when you start going out of your comfort zone and you feel that inner resistance, you feel insecurities come up, past unresolved issues being triggered, that's what you need to look into this here, these unresolved issues. And of course, sometimes just talking to somebody about it can be a big thing, whether it's, someone you trust like a friend, family, but often therapists are the best people to do this to. But you can also analyze this yourself and to really look at what are these barriers, these physical, emotional, psychological barriers that are preventing you from achieving your goal, which is ultimately going to lead you to your true happiness. What is your comfort zone? And the question to ask is, why are you finding it so difficult to get through these barriers? And this is something I had to do. I had so many different barriers. There are still some that I have to learn to overcome as well. But I thought I needed to make this video because this is what I believe is the major root cause of having difficulties in reaching our psychological, emotional, and physical goals, i.e. our well-being goals, because it requires us to experience some uncomfortable feelings. It requires us to experience resistance, and it requires us to resolve the resistance as well. This is why, for some people, achieving their goals is just so quick and easy, because they don't necessarily have this resistance. They don't have these unresolved issues which are kind of pulling them back. Or alternatively, they have had these issues, but they've learned how to deal with them. And so that's ultimately what the one bad habit is to rule them all. It's continuing to choose the path of least resistance. And if you keep mastering this one bad habit, your comfort zone will slowly but surely shrink, making it more and more difficult to reach your goals. And ultimately, reaching your goals is most likely going to be helping to meet the psychological, emotional, and physical needs that are going to lead you to true happiness. So what I can suggest you do, and this is something that I've been focusing on recently, is just becoming aware of where do you think you might be taking the path of least resistance? Where do you think that your comfort zone is? And look in the past and see, was there a time where you had a much bigger comfort zone? What was it that made that change, where you found it more and more difficult to go outside of it? So thank you for watching. I hope this video really helped, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.